Welcome to Mershman Seeds Cup of Joe. On this episode, special guest Kris Ehler joins us and talks about his experience with ultra early planting, gives his planting recommendations for farmers in East Central Illinois, as well as 3 pieces of advice that can help you increase your soybean yield. Learn how politics may have tainted the Dicamba decision. Stick around to hear Joe's corny jokes.
Hi, this is Joe Mershman. Welcome to Mershman Seeds Cup of Joe, Season 3, Episode number 33. Today we have our regulars. We have Turk and Ben, but we also have 2 special guests. We have Kent Steinman, our area sales manager for Eastern Illinois, as well as Kris Ehler from Ehler Brothers in Thomasboro, Illinois, which is located in Champaign County. Kris is considered the guru when it comes to early planting. He has more experience than anybody I know from a testing side about ultra early planting. Now, I'm not talking planting like the last week of April. I'm talking much earlier than that. So, Kris, I'm going to turn it over to you. Tell us what got you started on this test plot where you plant ultra early.
Well, I'd take it back to 2009. A guy by the name of Kip Kohlers had just set the soybean record of 160.6. And in our geography, 65 bushel beans were really good. I mean, a grower was happy with 65 bushel. And I looked at that yield gap between 160 and 65. I'm saying, where's the 100 bushels at? We live in God's country here in East Central Illinois, where we're blessed with some really productive soils. So in my research of what can we do differently to increase our soybean yields, one thing kept showing up on this plant earlier. So in 2009, I did my first early planting trial. That was April 17th or 18th. And there were no beans being planted in April in 2009. When we harvested that plot, after being called a lot of things by my father, who ran our farming operation, they ended up being 10 bushel better than the mid-May planted soybeans right next to them. And that's when the light bulb went off. And from there, it was kind of every year was a learning situation. For example, that 2009 trial, within 5 days of being planted, had 7 inches of rain on it. I wrote it off, but I ended up with 90+% stand. And again, things started to turn in my head going, well, maybe we're not looking at the same soybean crop that we've read about in the textbooks for the last 20 or 30 or 40 years. And my testing turned into, well, how early can we go? What is the soil temperature for soybeans? And then it became okay, I've had so many successes. Now I want to try and fail, which pushed me back further and further in the calendar. And my earliest date was 2017. We had a really great stretch of weather, and I planted on February 22nd that year.
This has been a painful experience for me, Kris, because I never bet more than a quarter. And I think, was it that year or the following year, I bet you a quarter you would get no stand, and I delivered a quarter to you, if I remember correctly.
I cherish that quarter very, very, very often. I keep it in my office, actually, under lock and key. To have Joe Mershman's quarter that's pretty special. That was a March planting date. And I think that one was one that had probably worse conditions post planting than I've ever seen. We had 4 or 5 snows on that. Just horrible weather after I planted, but still ended up with a 85-90% stand on that trial. And I think they were 76, 78 bushel beans.
Well, Kris, how important is seed treatment to that ultra early planting?
Seed treatments are very important, in my opinion. I think it's something that growers get a little complacent with. They say, I've got treated seed, but I think growers leave out a lot of opportunity. And I say that on each bean, there, roughly 8 ounces of opportunity per 100 pounds. So that leaves 4 ounces actually per bag of seed treatment to go on. And typically the standard fungicide insecticide is only going to take up about a quarter of that space. So what else can that grower be doing to put on for a seed treatment to help mitigate or get rid of some of the major pests out there that we deal with, or diseases? SDS is one of them. When you plant early, you've got a higher incidence or higher probability of seeing SDS. So we've got tools in our toolbox with a seed treatment to take care of that. Same thing with cyst nematode. I think growers would be astonishingly surprised if they actually pulled some soil samples and saw what their cyst counts were. And we've got, again, tools in our toolbox from a seed treatment perspective to help offset some of those yield robbing diseases and or pests.
Also, when it comes to population, are you jacking the population way up, or are you keeping it at normal population? What are you doing there when you plant ultra early?
So contrary to what conventional thinking would be on an early planting, you're going into a horrible environment. You're going to be in the ground for 30, 40, 50 days. People would think, well, I'm just going to raise my population and get a higher probability of having success. Well, I've proven that the success part is almost given. And what I've learned is the early planted soybeans tend to put more nodes on, and more nodes means you're going to get a little bit more growth, going to get taller. What you don't want to see is overpopulation in early planting trials. So actually, I bumped my population down. I'm very conservative. This last planting date that I just did on March 10th, I dropped that 30-inch rows at 122,000. And again, if we're looking at an 85, 90% stand, I'm still going to be in that 100,000 range, which a lot of the data suggests that 90,000 is absolutely fine. You're still in the 99th percentile of yield potential at 90,000 plants per acre.
Over the years, some of your beans have got frosted. What happens when they get frosted? After they're out of the ground, then they get frosted.
Sure, and I will say this: 2009, I've been doing this. This was my, I think, 13th consecutive year of doing these trials. I did have my first crop failure last year. We had not a frost event, we had a freeze event on May 10th. And I had March 9th planted soybeans that I had probably the best stand of any of my early trials ever. And they were going on V2. I mean, they were pushing the second trifoliate on May 10th when we got this freeze event. And it took me down to 18,500 final stand. So in certain situations, if you get a frost on a seedling and say you frost the cotyledons, that's not a bad thing because your growing point is actually sandwiched between those cotyledons and it's protected. So if you lose the cotyledons, that plant will actually throw two main stems. And I actually really like branching from a standpoint of, plant architecture. If we allow that plant to branch, do what it does naturally, then that's a good thing. Because when it starts throwing branches, we've got additional areas to set pods, more beans, more yield, more money in our back pocket.
So Kris, what is your recommendation for early planting? I know you're trying to fail by planting super early, but what do you tell your customers? Ehler Brothers Company has been a Mershman dealer since the early 80s, and you sell a lot of seed in Champaign County and surrounding counties. What do you tell your farmers?
We promote that April 15th to April 20th planting date in East Central Illinois. And why we do that is it's a risk-reward balance. And we feel that by planting April 15th, April 20th, it's the lowest amount of risk with the greatest amount of reward, where that balance is nice and even. And the reason why we say that, it's probably going to take 10 days to get a bean out of the ground on April 15th. That's going to push us closer to getting out of that frost-free window of roughly May 7th in East Central Illinois. So, that's kind of big for us, promoting that, because we don't want to put a grower in a position to fail. And again, we look at what the crop insurance dates are. We want to make sure that they are planning within those crop insurance windows as well to access free replant if necessary.
Kent, do you have anything to add about early planting and anything to talk about that from your experience backing up what Kris has been doing?
Oh, I think it's huge. We've been learning a lot about where we need to be. I think growers just need to understand when that, for a lot of it's going to be insurance date, and replant, right? So if they do want to plant early, they've got to understand what the replant policy is going to be for us, especially.
Yeah. They assume that risk of,
yes,
they say, okay, I'd like to plant in March, but I'm going to assume that risk knowing that possibly my ultimate reward will offset anything. And I think that I will be okay and not have to replant. But if I do, it's on that grower. So,
but man, they sure can up the yield on it. I'm a big believer in that. And it's been fun.
Great. Kris, you got anything else that you'd like to tell the audience of Cup of Joe about your experience with early planting?
Yeah, I'll share a couple things from our running averages in our plot work. It's roughly 9 to 10 bushel between April 15th and May 15th. Again, those are really realistic planting dates within East Central Illinois. Easy math, that's $100 per acre. That is low hanging fruit, doesn't cost a grower anything. I tell them, go out there, get those free bushels. For a 500 acre farmer, you're talking about $50,000 of possible income coming into your operation. That's big money. That's real money. And I'll share with growers, I think that my 3 lowest hanging fruits for increasing your yields, if you've been stagnant on soybean yields, number 1, seed treatment. Maximize what's going on that seed, optimize that real estate, and use the products to minimize any possible yield loss events, whether that's disease or insects or nematodes. Number 2, plant early. Again, I just told you it's worth $100 per acre and it doesn't cost you anything. And number 3, that R2, R3 application of a fungicide and a good, I'll stress, good insecticide. We got away with cheap pyrethroids for a long time, but when you start layering the insect pressure that we're seeing these days between Japanese beetles, bean leaf beetles, stink bugs, green clover worm, when you start layering insect feeding, you want to make sure you've got a good insecticide out there. And I think those good insecticides have paid just as much as the good fungicides in the last 2 to 3 years. And we're seeing anywhere from 6 to 10 bushel return on that R2, R3 application. So lot of opportunity.
Kris, you're on Twitter. Can you give us how they can, our listeners can follow you and get some additional information? Because you post all season long a lot of good reports and about this particular early test and whatnot. How can they follow you?
Yeah, so I do 2 main social media platforms. On Facebook, you can find me at the pursuit of 100 plus bushel soybeans. And on the Little Blue Bird, you can find me at bean_dork. I consider myself a bean dork, so only fitting.
Well, that's not a bad thing, Kris.
It's not.
Well, thanks for joining us today. I know you're really busy with delivering Mershman seed, and we really don't want to interrupt that, but you have such a great story to tell our listeners and watchers about Ehler Brothers Company. You know, you got a big crew over there with David and Linda and Shelby and Aaron and yourself, and just a tremendous crew, including your drivers and delivery folks. We're really proud to be associated with your organization and look forward to working with you in the coming years.
Thank you, Joe, and appreciate everything you do. And I'll leave it with go Illini.
Okay. We'll accept that today. Thanks a lot. Well, that was great to have Kris give us an update about his early planting testing. It's always something you can learn from folks out there, and we appreciate that. Ben, what do you got for us today?
There was an article last week from the Progressive Farmer DTN by Emily Unglesby. EPA politics tainted the Dicamba decision. So I thought I would read a little bit off of this article. There's some interesting facts in here. From the EPA's Office of Chemical Safety and Pollution Prevention, they are stating there are 3 main things that tainted the 2018 registration of the Dicamba post-application registration for the 3 different chemicals that they have working there. And those 3 different things is that they relied on a limited data set of plant effective endpoints. Number 2, they discounted specific studies, some with more robust data used in assessing potential risks and benefits. And number 3, they discounted scientific information on negative impacts. So there was better data out there. They chose not to use some of that data. according to this article from the Progressive Farmer, and basically they're asking, so what happens now? So this Office of Chemical Safety and Pollution Prevention is saying that in a conference that they had on March 8th is that they feel that they need one more growing season worth of data under their belts to see what happens, to make sure the right measures are put in place in 2020, and to make sure that they're going forward with the right decisions on dicamba.
So to kind of put it in a summary, it looks like there was some political influence on this decision for the dicamba registration, and that may now with the new administration maybe be re-looked at a little bit closer.
Correct. It looks like it's coming under light that they have had issues with politics playing a role and not just the data-driven science. So
we'll see what happens.
Yep.
So in addition to all the lawsuits that are in the courts and going through the court system, now basically the EPA is kind of and the administration, the new administration is kind of reversing course and going to take a harder look at anything that happened under the Trump administration for the most part. And so I think I made this prediction earlier. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when this is going to change dramatically for folks that are on the dicamba system.
There's no question about it. If we find a lot of off-target movement this year, this could be the straw that breaks the camel's back, with all the evidence now that says that this product is really going to have to perform this year and stay home, or we probably won't have it next year. I would agree with Turk. That's my prediction, in my opinion, too.
And we hope it does stay home. We hope the new vapor drip technology works, and we hope the farmers get the option to choose to plant whatever they want to plant.
That's right.
Maybe some new technology will come out where they'll find a real safener that does keep it home.
Yep. I know that we have a lot of folks that would that plant our products that would appreciate that.
Yes.
So, anyhow, Turk, what do you have for us today?
I just want to talk just a little bit about markets. We had some big corn sales this week to China, and in spite of those large sales, the markets took a pretty good dive on Thursday. And so, again, nothing new. Those sales were expected, and so really nothing's changed. And the volatility that we're seeing is pretty normal. Traders are evening up their positions after every report, after every weather forecast, after everything. But the long-term fundamentals are still in place. We have the shortest supply of both corn and soybeans that we've had in years and years and years. And I think those supplies are going to get tighter before we get to the next crop, the new crop. So again, we're not going to take a dive out of the market. So I will say again, if you haven't taken advantage of some of these beans in the teens and corn at $4.50 and up, which is available to anybody right now that wants to do it, don't overlook it.
Yeah, we didn't record that, but Kris Ehler, his advice was, don't just look at the market. Do something.
Do something, yes.
And that's a good advice. Well, thank you, Turk. If you saw me fiddling with my phone, and that's because I really got a really good corny joke, and it keeps going blank, so I had to refresh it. But before I get to that, this past week we've had a lot of rain across our whole area, and this one ties in real well. What did the dirt say to the rain? What did the dirt say to the rain? If this keeps up, my name will be Mud. Now, this one here is a little bit of a factoid, a little bit of history lesson here. In March of 1876, Alexander Graham Bell makes the first phone call ever. Moments later, he was notified that his car warranty had expired. Well, that wraps it up for this week. Looks like after listening and watching this episode, everybody's going to hook their planter up and get ready to plant. But we're just about a month away from planting, maybe a little less than a month in some areas. So it won't be long. So make sure you got your seed. And thanks for watching and listening this week. We'll see you next week. Hope you and your family are well. Take care.